Dr. Francis McIntosh specializes in the archaeology of northeastern England and is an expert on this celebrated ruin.
So we're here in the top end of the church, in the apse, which is the top of the cross.
The position of this construction, completed around 1150, was all important, and only exists because of an even older structure that lies at its feet.
They picked this spot for the church because we think this is where the 7th century church was. So this is a real kind of centre of Christianity, and it was the centre of the cult.
The high altar of that 7th century church held the body of the man behind this cult. And yet, this tomb contains neither a body nor a coffin.
And that is what we see now, a 12th century priory with a cenotaph, meaning an empty tomb.
So who was this cenotaph dedicated to? And why is the body no longer here? This rocky outcrop is the holy island of Lindisfarne, barely connected to the mainland by a causeway.
The tide rises so quickly here that on average, 1 car per month still gets stranded. But you can imagine how 1,000 years ago, this natural feature would have given the place a real mystical charm, created a real sense of wonder.
It was this sense of wonder, coupled with its isolation, that attracted the attention of King Oswald in the 7th century.
The era between the Romans leaving and the Norman conquest has really captured the imagination of people in recent years. I mean, you've got series such as The Vikings and The Last Kingdom. And in fact, King Oswald is said to have been the inspiration for the character Aragorn in Lord of the Rings.
Oswald's Northumberland covered a vast amount of land, making it the northern powerhouse of England, which at the time was made up of a small handful of warring Anglo-Saxon kingdoms.
He's going to let all of the other rulers on the Isle of Great Britain and on the continent of Europe know that he is a holy king and a wealthy king.
Oswald gifted Lindisfarne to monks in order to establish a monastery at the heart of his political kingdom.
And he was driven, like all rulers, by the desire to have monks praying for his soul and praying for the health and welfare of his lands. Christianity was a political act.
In the 670s, a monk named Cuthbert joined the monastery.
Cuthbert is himself a very holy man who likes a life of spiritual contemplation. He prefers to live as a hermit, and yet he's willing to act as a spiritual guide to kings.
News of Cuthbert's holiness spread, and in 685 the king appointed him bishop. So he was dragged back into the world of politics, the court, nobles, religion, but yet he still retained a reputation as a holy man, as a seer, as a healer, as a pastor.
But just a few years later, Cuthbert died. It's believed his body was placed in a stone coffin at the eastern end of the original building.
When his tomb was opened 11 years later, to everyone's astonishment, his body was found to be intact, uncorrupted. And it was a message to everyone that Cuthbert was truly divinely favoured.
And that's when the cult really starts. People start coming to pray, to ask for miracles. We hear of a paralysed boy who wore the shoes of Cuthbert, who was healed. A monk came here and fell seriously ill. He prayed by Cuthbert's grave and was miraculously cured. This is where the pilgrims would come to that high altar to see Cuthbert's grave.
As a result, powerful kings and rulers donated lands to it, making Lindisfarne one of the most important monastic sites in Britain.
And the ruins that extend off to the side of the original cross-shaped church reflect its increasing wealth.
All of these buildings were once filled with monks hard at work, tilling the land, receiving donations, writing out manuscripts, preserving knowledge, praying for the souls of their benefactors.
It was in this context of increasing prestige and learning that the monks of this priory produced something extraordinary.
The Lindisfarne Gospels are one of the undoubted treasures of the world. It shows influences from the Celtic world, from the Anglo-Saxon world, and even the Mediterranean world, showing just how international a place Lindisfarne was. And not only are they one of the most beautiful Latin Bibles ever produced in England, but also a scribe has written translations of the Gospels in Old English underneath, making them one of the earliest sources of the Bible in Old English, long before the Reformation.
But the monastery's geographical position, once seen as a strength, would soon become its weakness.
You put this monastery on a holy island because it would protect them from armies coming from land. They didn't think for a moment that they had to worry about an army coming from the sea.
Holy Island, England, June 8, 793 AD.
A sizable force of Norse Vikings come from the sea.
So the sea's quite far away now, but we know it was much closer in the 8th century. So when the Vikings pulled up on the beach in their longship, they would have been much closer to the monastery. Really quite a quick, sprint up the beach to come and attack, so the monks would not have had much warning.
According to one of the chroniclers, they came in like fierce wolves. And they murdered the monks, and they carried others off in chains.
When word of this bloody assault got out, its impact was far-reaching.
It's the first attack on a Christian settlement. It's not the first attack by the Vikings in Britain, but it's really quite shocking. It shakes the church.
And it was on such a horrific scale that the news spread like wildfire across Western Europe.
Gravestones found on the ground show that some felt this was divine vengeance.
Why did Saint Cuthbert not intervene and prevent such barbaric slaughter and protect the monks? For many, this was a sign that doomsday was coming.
In fact, it was the start of the Viking Age. The monks soon fled and took Cuthbert's remains with them. This wandering community of monks carried Cuthbert's coffin with them until it was enshrined at Durham Cathedral. Centuries later, when they felt it safe, they returned to the Holy Island.
12th century monks wanted Lindisfarne to be a place of pilgrimage, and they didn't have St. Cuthbert's body anymore. So they built an empty tomb where St. Cuthbert had been buried, and they succeeded in making that a place of pilgrimage.
It's believed stone from the original church was reused in the building of this later incarnation, and its layout reflects the strength of Cuthbert's cult in the Middle Ages.
The church that's built here seems to be mirrored or trying to copy Durham, and it becomes almost a second centre of the cult of Cuthbert.